Dust hung heavy in the air, a dry, abrasive haze that dulled the sun's brutal glare as Jebediah Kane urged his half-starved gelding across the parched basin. 3 weeks on the trail, with dwindling water and dwindling hope, had carved deep lines into the cowboy's weathered face. His wide-brimmed hat, frayed at the edges, sagged low over sharp, sunburnt features. Leather chaps flaked at the seams. Everything about him looked worn thin, stretched taut as an old saddle cinch. But it wasn't thirst or hunger that weighed him down so much as guilt, a black ache that sat in his chest like a coiled snake. He'd buried his brother back in Tucumcari after a gunfight gone wrong. His fault. He hadn't stopped the drinking, hadn't stopped the words that led to drawn pistols and blood on the floor of some dim saloon. One shot too slow, one mistake too many. Now, Jeb sought only distance from his name, from the past, from the hollow ache gnawing at his gut each dawn. The Llano Estacado seemed a good place to disappear, harsh and endless with few witnesses. But the land itself seemed to reject him. The high plains offered no shade, no water, only an endless flat horizon where the sky pressed down heavy and unforgiving. The trail narrowed to a dry canyon rimmed with dying cottonwoods. A trickle of wind stirred brittle leaves. Jeb's instincts prickled sharp and cold. Too narrow, too still, a place for an ambush. He slowed the gelding and studied the terrain. Bone-white rocks jutted from sun-baked earth. The wind dropped to a hush. Not a bird, not a coyote call, just silence. He shifted the worn Winchester loose across his lap and nudged the horse forward. He'd ridden too far to turn back. If trouble waited ahead, he'd meet it head-on. Then, a flicker of movement, a form in the shadows, unnatural in the still world. At first he thought it was a scarecrow, something left to ward off coyotes. But no, the figure resolved with grim clarity. A woman, bound upright to the rough trunk of the largest cottonwood. Thick hemp ropes bit into her arms, shoulders pinned back, ankles tied. Her head slumped, dark hair tangled across her face. The skin of her arms was sun-darkened, streaked with dust. Her dress, Navajo woven, hung in torn, grimy tatters. And above her, a crude sign nailed to the bark. Only the pure. Jeb stiffened. The scene felt wrong in the marrow of his bones. A trap? A warning? He scanned the rocks, the ridge above, finger resting on the rifle's trigger guard. No movement, no glint of rifles, no scent of horses. But the land itself seemed wrong, as if it had been holding its breath for too long. He dismounted slowly. If it was a trick, he'd take the risk. He wasn't about to leave a woman tied up to die, not even if the devil himself waited in the shadows. He approached cautiously. "Miss," his voice rasped dryly from days without real water. No response. He touched her shoulder lightly. She flinched, her body shivering. Slowly, her face turned upward, eyes blinking open, dark eyes, hollowed by thirst and exhaustion. A thin bruise colored one cheekbone. Rope cuts ringed her wrists. She'd been here for days, left to die. "Miss, can you hear me?" She tried to speak, only a rough wheeze. Jeb tugged his canteen from the saddlebag, uncorked it, and dribbled precious drops to her cracked lips. She swallowed weakly. Again, more this time. Her lips moved. "You not them?" The words were a hoarse whisper, her tongue thick with thirst. Jeb shook his head. "No. Name's Kane. Jeb Kane. I reckon you're in trouble, miss." With quick work of his clasp knife, he cut the ropes. Her knees buckled at once. He caught her, easing her to the ground. The woman sagged against the tree trunk, breath shallow but steadier. Her skin was fever-hot beneath his touch. When he asked her name, she gave it after a long pause. "Tala." "Well, Tala," Jeb said, scanning the canyon again. "You're lucky I came along." He glanced again at the rough sign. "Only the pure." His gut tightened. "Who did this to you?" "People from my own clan, driven by old fear." Her voice was ragged but steadying. "They say I am marked." Jeb's brow furrowed. "Marked for what?" "For death," she said simply. He didn't know what the hell that meant. But something had driven people to do this. Not bandits, not bounty hunters. Her people, fear, pure and sharp, had carved this cruelty. With effort, he lifted her onto the gelding's saddle, tied her lightly so she wouldn't fall. The animal, as starved as its rider, obeyed with weary steps as Jeb led it out of the canyon. But at the ridge, cold dread crept up his spine. Across the basin below, 3 mounted figures had appeared at the canyon mouth, black silhouettes in the falling light. Watching. They didn't pursue. Not yet. Just watching. Jeb pressed on, heart thudding. He needed distance, shelter. By dusk, they reached a half-dry stream beneath a leaning juniper. He set camp. The gelding slumped, grateful for water. Tala lay on a blanket. Her gaze followed the firelight. When he handed her watered whiskey, she sipped, then spoke clearer. "You should leave me. They will come. The dark ones. I carry a curse." The stars burned cold over the desert basin, hard and bright as scattered bones in the sky. Jeb Kane sat with his back to a half-dead juniper, rifle across his lap, eyes narrowed against the night. The small cook fire had burned down to a ring of glowing coals, casting only a faint light on the huddled figure of Tala beneath a worn blanket. She slept uneasily, dark hair tangled across her face, her body still weak from thirst and rope burns, yet her presence seemed heavier than mere flesh, something old and marked, like a stone that had stood too long in the sun. Jeb hadn't slept. Couldn't. The land was too still. The silence pressed in, thick and unnatural. Even the coyotes had gone quiet. Now and then he'd scan the horizon, every flicker of wind-bent grass catching his wary gaze. And always his mind returned to that sign nailed above her head. Only the pure. It gnawed at him. The words weren't just cruelty or superstition. They stank of a deeper fear. A curse maybe, or worse, belief. Jeb wasn't a man who much cared for Indian tales. He'd spent too many years chasing cattle and dodging bullets across a land soaked in blood. But something about this girl, this place, twisted that hard-earned skepticism. Her people had left her to die, and if they feared her enough to do that, maybe he ought to listen closer. The wind shifted. Jeb froze. A faint scent drifted through the night, coppery, musky. Wrong. His gut clenched. He rose in a slow crouch, rifle ready, and scanned the darkness. No hoofbeats, no human voices, just a low vibration, as if the ground itself thrummed with something unseen. A whisper stirred from the shadows beneath the rocks. Not words, sound like dry leaves brushing bone. His pulse quickened. He moved to the fire, nudging Tala's shoulder. "Time to move, miss." His voice was low, rough. Now. Her eyes fluttered open. She sat up with a gasp, as if surfacing from a nightmare. Her gaze darted to the darkness beyond the fire. "They come." Jeb didn't argue. He hauled her upright, helped her onto the gelding, and kicked out the last embers of the fire. The night swallowed them whole. He led the horse at a brisk pace, moving west toward a rocky outcrop he'd spotted earlier. High ground, defensible. They made the ridge in minutes, breath short, legs aching. From here he could see the basin below, faint starlight silvering the land. Shapes moved in the dark. Not riders. Not men. Too fast. Too smooth. Jeb's throat went dry. He'd seen Comanche raiders, he'd seen wolves on the hunt, but nothing like this. Shadows rippled across the earth, four-limbed but wrong somehow, as if their bones bent where no bones should. And no sound but that same dry whispering. He shouldered the rifle. "You know what those things are?" Tala's voice shook. "Skinwalkers. The true ones." Jeb didn't know if that meant witches or spirits, or if it mattered. Whatever they were, they hunted her. Hunted them both now. A sudden hiss of wind swept the ridge. From below, the shadows surged, too fast to aim. Jeb fired instinctively. The crack echoed through the night. Something screeched, high and thin, more insect than animal. He worked the lever, fired again. A shape crumpled, but did not fall, melted into the ground like smoke. "Moo!" He dragged Tala behind a cluster of boulders as another shriek pierced the dark. The gelding reared and bolted, vanishing into the night. No use chasing. They were on foot now. For long minutes the thing circled. Jeb caught glimpses, pale eyes gleaming, bodies shifting between shapes. Half wolf, half human, half something else. His rifle spat round after round, but they seemed to melt away, regrouping, testing. Then they came in a rush, 3 shapes darting between rocks. Jeb fired twice more, catching one square in the chest. It fell this time, staying still. The others pulled back. Silence returned, but heavy, waiting. Tala's breathing was ragged. They will not stop. They hunt until dawn, or until the marked one is dead. You're the marked one? Jeb asked, teeth clenched. She nodded. When the skinwalker touched me, I lived. Others die, but now they claim I carry its corruption. That is why I was left bound to the tree. Jeb swore under his breath. You think I give a damn about curses? You're a woman, and I won't leave you. She gave a thin smile. Then you may die for it. So be it. They waited, every sense drained. The stars turned slowly overhead. An hour passed, then another. Jeb's ammo was running low. 6 rounds left. Just before dawn, the air grew colder. The shadows grew thicker. And from the dark came a shape taller than the rest. A figure cloaked in blackened skins, its face hidden beneath an elk skull mask. Antlers gleamed pale in the starlight. Tala's breath caught. The master. Jeb raised a rifle. The thing did not charge. It raised one clawed hand, and the lesser shadows drew back. Then it spoke, not aloud, but in Jeb's skull, a voice old as stone. Leave the marked one. Walk away, gunman. She is ours. Jeb spat into the dirt. You want her, you come take her. The voice laughed, a sound that curdled the blood. The figure stepped forward, slow and sure. Jeb aimed and fired, once, twice. The round struck, but the thing did not fall. It staggered, then straightened, eyes burning. You cannot kill what is beyond death. Tala rose suddenly beside him. Her face was calm, fierce. There is a way, she whispered. But you must trust me. I don't have much choice, do I? She gripped his arm. Keep them off me. I will break the bond. Before he could stop her, she stepped from cover, arms raised. Her voice rose in a chant, strange words in an old tongue, echoing across the rocks. The air shimmered, the earth trembled. The masked figure snarled, shadows writhing around it. Jeb fired at the shapes that surged forward. One dropped. Another fled. The rifle was nearly empty. He drew his Colt, blasting away as the night closed in. Then, a shockwave of sound and light burst from Tala's outstretched hands. A scream tore from the master figure, a raw, unearthly wail that echoed for miles. The shadows writhed in agony. The thing staggered, cloak burning with a greenish fire. Tala's chant rose higher. Her body shook. The masked figure howled once more. Then, with a final shriek, it dissolved into ash, the lesser shadows vanishing like smoke. Silence returned. Real silence, this time. The first light of dawn bled into the sky. Jeb lowered the gun, breathing hard. Tala sagged to her knees. He caught her before she fell. You did it, he said. She smiled faintly, eyes half-lidded. For now. Jeb glanced around. The land was empty again. No shadows. No watchers. Just 2 worn souls on a high ridge, alive by a thread. We'd best move, he said. Sun's coming. And I reckon there'll be more after us when word spreads. Tala nodded. You are right, Kane. The curse may fade, but those who fear it will not. He helped her to her feet. Together they limped west into the growing light. Jeb didn't know where the trail would lead, only that he wouldn't leave her now, and that something darker than bullets or blood still rode the desert wind. By the 3rd day after the ridge battle, the land had begun to change. Where once the desert basin lay flat and harsh beneath a sky of iron, now the ground rose in folds of broken stone, scattered with ancient pinyons and twisting junipers. The air was cooler here. The wind scented faintly of sage and distant rain. Far off to the north, faint against the dawn, stood a line of red stone spires, sacred ground, Tala had called it. A place where even the skinwalkers feared to tread. But getting there was a test of will. They traveled at dawn and dusk, resting by day in the shelter of caves and underhangs. Jeb's supplies were low, 1 half-empty canteen, a few strips of dried meat, and 6 cartridges left for the Colt. The gelding had bolted clean in the night, No hope of finding it now. Their boots carried them forward, mile by mile, through broken country. Jeb bore the strain without complaint, though each step reopened the old wounds of guilt and grief that had driven him into this forsaken land. The brother he hadn't saved, the blood he couldn't wash away. Somehow, looking after this outcast girl gave purpose to the weary ache inside him. Tala traveled with a quiet strength. Her fever had broken after the second dawn, and though her body was still lean with exhaustion, her dark eyes had sharpened, watching the horizon, tracking the unseen. She spoke little, but when she did, her words weighed heavy with meaning. "They will come again," she said once, pausing beneath a wind-scoured ledge. Killing the master slowed them, but others' hunger for power, for the mark. Jeb adjusted the Colt on his hip. "Why? What is this mark they want so bad?" She touched her chest lightly. "When a skinwalker touched me, and I lived, I carried something away from it, a piece of its power, or its curse. They seek that piece. If they devour it, they grow stronger." Jeb considered that in silence. He wasn't a man for witch lore or ghost stories. But after what he'd seen, his stubborn disbelief had worn thin. "Then we need to reach those stones." Tala nodded. "There, we can sever the mark. But not without cost." He grunted. "Seems there's always a cost." The journey grew harder as the spires neared. The land rose in sharp escarpments, gullies twisted like old scars. Jeb's boots wore thin at the heels. His shoulders ached beneath the rifle's weight. But he kept pace beside her, wary of the dusk shadows that lengthened too quickly behind them. The third night, the shadows returned. It began with a chill that crept beneath the skin, colder than any desert wind. The stars seemed to dim, and the whispering, faint at first, then rising, a chorus of voices without mouths. Tala froze, eyes wide. "They are here." From the rocks below, shapes flowed like black water. Not men, not animals. Things born of hunger and old hate, drawn to her scent. Jeb's heart hammered. "Run!" They fled through a narrow ravine, boots pounding the stone. Behind them, shrieks split the night. High, tearing cries that rattled the bones. One shape lunged close. Jeb spun and fired. The thing fell in a heap of burning flesh, its eyes still glowing as it crumbled. But there were too many, too fast. Just when it seemed the tide would close around them, Tala stopped abruptly before a fallen stone carved with old symbols. She raised her hands and shouted words in her native tongue, fierce, cutting words that rang through the ravine. A burst of light flared outward, white and searing. The closest shadows recoiled, shrieking in fury. A moment of reprieve. "This way," she called, grabbing Jeb's arm. They climbed hard, scrambling over jagged rock. Breath tore from their lungs. But inch by inch, the ground rose, until at last they crested a narrow saddle between cliffs. Before them stood the spires, massive red pillars of stone, ancient as the earth. Wind-carved and towering, they ringed a natural amphitheater strewn with weathered bones and faded offerings. The air within was still, almost sacred. No wind stirred. The sky above glimmered with stars untouched by the dark. Tala sank to her knees, voice low with reverence. "Here, this is where we make the stand." Jeb scanned the rim, Colt ready. "How do we stop them here?" She met his gaze, solemn. "The stones hold old power. If I can call it, the mark can be broken. But they will fight to stop me." Jeb checked his rounds. For shots. He holstered the Colt and drew his knife, a long, curved blade worn smooth by use. "Then you do what you must, and I'll keep them off your back." Tala gave a faint smile. A fool's courage, but welcome. The ritual began at moonrise. Tala moved among the stones, chanting softly, her voice rising with each pass. Her hands traced symbols in the air, her feet marked circles on the sacred ground. The earth beneath them seemed to hum, as if some great force stirred far below. And then they came. The shadows poured into the amphitheater like a flood of ink. Dozens now, more than Jeb had seen before. Pale eyes gleamed in the dark. Clawed limbs scuttled and leapt. The very air seemed to thicken with their malice. Jeb stood before Tala, blade ready. The first shape lunged, a gaunt form with a wolf's head and human hands. He sidestepped and drove the knife up under its jaw. Hot ichor splashed his arm. Another followed. He slashed low, gutting the thing in a spray of black. But for every one that fell, 3 more circled. The chant behind him grew louder, Tala's voice ringing with raw power. The stones pulsed faintly. A shadow darted in too fast. Claws raked Jeb's side. He gritted his teeth, slashing back, driving the thing away. Blood ran down his ribs, hot and sticky. He stumbled, breath ragged. And then, a cry from Tala. She had collapsed to her knees, hands trembling. The chant faltered. The shadows surged forward, sensing weakness. Jeb roared and charged, knife flashing. 2 more fell, but a third clawed his arm, tearing flesh. His vision blurred. "Tala," he gasped. "Finish it." Through the haze, her voice rose again, louder now, stronger. Words of defiance, of power drawn from the stones themselves. A tremor shook the ground. The spires flared with inner light. The shadows froze, shrieking in fury. Tala rose, her eyes glowing with fierce determination. "Begone!" she cried in the old tongue. "Return to the void." With a sound like thunder, the light burst outward in a blinding wave. The shadows writhed, shrieking, then dissolved into ash, swept away by a wind that howled through the spires. Silence returned. Jeb staggered, bleeding and exhausted. Tala knelt beside him, her touch cool on his brow. "It is done," she whispered. "The mark is broken." He gave a ragged laugh. "Took you long enough." She smiled. "You are brave, Kane, and foolish. Story of my life." Dawn rose slow and pale over the stones. By its light, Jeb bound his wounds, weak but alive. Tala sat beside him, her gaze distant. "What now?" he asked. She looked east, where the land stretched endless and wild. "I must return, to face those who cast me out. The mark is gone, but their fear will remain." Jeb nodded. "You'll need someone at your back." She raised an eyebrow. "You would come?" He rose stiffly, hand on the colt. "Reckon I'm done running from ghosts. Might as well ride with someone worth the trouble." Her smile was soft. "Then we ride together." Side by side, they left the sacred ground. 2 outcasts bound by blood, by courage, by something older than either could name. The trail ahead was long, the dangers many. But for the first time in many years, Jeb Kane rode not alone, and perhaps not lost.